Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have any other questions? I'm not seeing any raised hands or anything in the chat.
This is Diana. So I got a couple of chats asking me, is the slides going to be posted? They're going to be posted, Chris, after the call. Bob Christie's asking, will this conference call be recorded? I started the recording just a little while ago, so yes. Any other questions? Let us know.
Diana,
ahead,
when did you start the recording?
A couple minutes ago.
Okay.
A minute ago.
So I'm going to do a quick summary at the end then to cover the discussion points that I had done earlier, just so that you get the full recording.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So based upon the COTP adjustment, this accounted for the majority of the principal deviations that I was seeing, I was getting from the disputes. However, in doing further research, as well as having some conversations with the FV that submitted disputes, we did identify that we had two files that had some corruptions in the files themselves. The first one is the March 2005 startup cost file. Now this one, for when I built the file, it pulled in into the information for the entire year. And then somewhere between the time frame of me building the file and narrowing it down to just March, this file somehow became corrupt, and I missed the fact that it was corrupted. So this caused our startup interest calculations to be incorrect because it was using a much more significant startup cost. Actually, it was more along the line of the minimum load cost for the startup interest calculations. So I know the question will be asked, but this resulted in an interest calculation over collection and overpayment of approximately $1 million. And so we will be doing some adjustments to the interest calculations related to the March 2005 startup costs recalculation. Then in the other file was the October 2007 minimum low cost calculations. The interest calculations were being performed correctly throughout the majority of the interest period. However, for some reason, the Excel spreadsheet that I was using, the cells stopped calculating starting in the last three quarters of the interest period. So we actually had an incorrect interest for October 2007. So as I said, for root cause is a file corruption. I don't know how. I don't know what the exact nature of the corruption. I just know from my research that the correct principal was not being pulled in for March 2005, and that the interest calculations for October 2007 were not actually being calculated correctly. So what I did is I went back and I rebuilt all the files, not just March 2005, but October 2000 and October 2007. I did all of the startup files. I did all of the minimum low cost files. I compared these files to the original supporting information files that was distributed back in 2014. And I now have confidence that there is no corruption. I actually did it twice. So when after rebuilding the files, I recalculated all the interest. and this will be included in the adjustments for the recalculation. Any questions on this? Okay, not hearing any questions. I will move on to where we stand today in relationship to the uncollected invoices from the initial, and then based upon the recalculation, if these uncollected funds remain uncollected, what the values will be. So currently, we have approximately $2,682 or $83 which have been uncollected. Now, at some point when we have finalized the process and determined that they are not going to be collected, we will be redistributing this to the market using the shortfall process, which was the process that was in place during this time frame of the Amendment 60. So this will be adjustments to the invoices that are being paid. After the interest calculation, it changes due to COTP reallocation and the two corrupt files. If the SCs still we're not able to collect these funds from these particular SCs, it will go from $2,682 to $2,640. So there's not much a significant change, but again, from a dollar perspective, this is not a significant amount of dollars as well. Shauna, did you want to add anything, or Dennis, do you want to add anything to my description of the uncollected invoices?
What you've illustrated, James, is correct. Yes, it will be through a shortfall allocation process. And we have no idea yet when it's going to be done. We have to make sure that we have make all our efforts to collect from these entities, and we're still continuing that to speak. So we will decide that after the correction is made.
Thank you, Dennis. Is there any questions on the uncollected invoices? The last part is, now what do we do regarding the time period between the initial or preliminary statement for historical and then the final statement for historical. We need to make a determination as to whether or not interest should be calculated for this period. And if we make the determination that interest should be calculated, then which process should we use? The first thought is that because of this time period is under a different invoicing paradigm, that we would not calculate the interest between the preliminary and final and just allocate out the adjustments as needed. The second option is to, and I split down the third, but extend the Amendment 60 interest calculations from April 30th to the date in which we are going to do the recalculation invoice distribution. And that will then impact everybody's in relationship from the start of the original invoicing back in 2004, 2005, and so on. I have not determined the impact of that that interest calculation. The last one is to apply the interest paradigm that we do today, and that simply calculate the interest between the initial and the recalculation, or in this case, at the preliminary and final, and then do an interest distribution based upon invoice interest deltas. And so, I know my personal opinion is I'm leaning for using the old paradigm, but I would, and Sydney, if you could please chime in on this, I'd like to get some feedback on what the participants think.
Well, this is Sydney. Can you hear me?
Yes, Sydney, I can hear you.
I think based on the FERC guidance we've gotten in the FERC orders that we do need to bring the the interest forward to the date of the invoice with the incremental interest on the changes. So I think the delta calculates the interest of the invoice delta between the preliminary and the final that just relates to the corrections that we need to make and the impact of the interest, calculate the interest on those corrections. I think is consistent with the FERC guidance on what we need to do.
Okay, thank you, Sydney. So based upon, it looks like at this point we are looking at doing the second bullet here, but I would still love to hear if anybody has any feedback from participants.
Sure, it looks like Bonnie Blair has her hand raised. So Bonnie, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
This is Bonnie.
Louder, Bonnie.
Go ahead.
Can you guys hear me?
You're a bit distant.
Yeah, you're very faint, Bonnie.
All right, let me try to get closer to my computer. How's that? Better?
I can hear you,
Yeah.
Bonnie.
Okay, good. I will speak loudly. So I represent the Six Cities group. First, I want to make sure I understand what has happened. Invoices were sent out on April 30th, and am I right that people have paid those invoices?
Yes.
Okay.
With the exception of the shortfall that was discussed, that's the $2,000+ of uncollected.
Okay, but most people have paid the invoices, and that was what I understood to be the case. And that being the case, I want to strongly agree with Sydney that the right way to approach this is to look at the delta. And when you say the preliminary statement, we're talking about the April 30th statement, right?
Correct. So I would look at the delta of the interest that was published on the April 30th to the interest that is going to be published as part of the recalculation, depending upon what day we are going to do that. And then I will calculate interest based upon the FERC interest rate for that time period.
Right. I agree strongly with Sydney that the right way to do it is based on that delta, because if you were to simply extend the Amendment 60 interest calculation, I think you'd be way overcharging people because it wouldn't recognize the fact that they had paid, in some cases, substantial amounts of money based on the April 30th invoices. So I think it has to be based on the delta.
Okay. And that's one reason why I wanted to raise this, is I wanted to make sure everybody has an understanding of why or which method we were going. I didn't want to surprise anybody. And I thought it was best to look at the three options and present them, even then knowing that we were probably going to do the delta between the invoices.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. Anybody else have any comments or questions?
I'm not seeing any in the chat or any other raised hands. Is anyone else seeing any chat questions?
I can't see the chat anymore, so I'm assuming no. So in summary, and this is for the recording particularly, is we did an Amendment 60 interest invoice on April 30th of 2021. Upon the distribution of the invoice, we received 5 disputes that required some review of the interest calculations, particularly principal and then interest. Based upon that review, I identified that there was a COTP adjustment process or procedure that was executed during the distribution that was not adequately captured in the principal values that were the basis for the April 30th interest calculations. And we have performed those or included those reversals for the upcoming recalculation invoice. In addition, we identified 2 particular trade months, files associated with trade months, which we had some corruption. Based upon that, I have rebuilt every single trade month and trade periods files and recalculated all the interest based upon that. New files. I also validated each SC's principal values by month against the supporting files that was distributed back in 2014. And we are going to be issuing a recalculation statement, the date to be determined. But once we make that determination, I will calculate invoice delta interest between the recalculation statement and the preliminary statement or initial statement. I believe that's a good summary. Any other questions?
While we wait for people to raise their hand or enter their question in the chat, I just want to remind everyone that the recording is for informational and convenience purposes only, and any related transcription should not be reprinted without the ISA's permission.
Okay, I don't see any new questions. As always, if you have any questions after this call, you can always reach out to your client rep. You can submit a city case, and we'll be glad to respond to you. No, that's it. So thank you all. Thank you, James, and thank you, Isabella, for helping manage the call. And this wraps up this call. Thank you very much, all. Goodbye.
Thank you, everybody.